Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Today, we're having a special external speaker, guest speaker. Dr. Victor Ulloa is the Service Design Lead and Customer Experience Strategist at NASA, where he works in the Small Business Innovation Research Program. I think I could call that cyber, but maybe that's not how they refer to it. At Civic Actions, where he served as a senior strategist previously, he was also a learning designer, product manager, and developer for the DITAP program, training government contracting officers in design and engineering. He also served as the director of strategy at 18F, a civic consultancy for the federal government inside the federal government, and that is the role that Victor held when we first met at the Library of Congress a couple of years ago. He helped to direct strategy, and he manages the group of digital strategists and digital strategy practice, and served as a designer and strategist on various partner projects. 18F might be interesting for those of you on the call today who might be interested in pursuing strategy and design, possibly agile development projects in government, and trying to make some legacy systems work a bit more efficiently, bring your skills to bear. Previously, as a global education instructional designer and training development specialist at Google, Dr. Ulloa designed learning experiences and learning software for people in low to middle income countries around the world. Education could range from experiences covering how to develop web applications and how to use the internet to improve teaching and learning, to experiences exploring how to use internet technologies in post-disaster emergency response situations, as well as global digital literacy, which is what he's going to be talking to us about this morning. As part of that work, he also advised Google in global energy and access work. Prior to Google, he served as USAID and DHS as a science and technology policy advisor and development engineer, focusing on infrastructure, post-disaster reconstruction, climate neutrality, and global health. Building on his time teaching in secondary schools, he still teaches teachers as an educational specialist and adjunct professor of education, focusing on science and math education through classes, workshops, and video series. He occasionally conducts engineering research and is a certified health, trauma, and crisis counselor focusing in HIV, AIDS, crisis pregnancy, post-abortion, and miscarriage counseling. He also enjoys singing in his male a cappella group, teaching salsa classes on the weekend, and time with his wonderful family. So a busy guy. We're very grateful to him for spending some time with us today to talk about participatory design. And over to you, Victor.
Thank you. That introduction sounds really good. I don't know if that truly describes it. It sounds a lot better than it actually is. But I am really happy to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'm just going to share a little bit about my work and what I do. I think that you all are frozen for me again, which is fine. As long as you can see me and hear me, then I'm okay with that. But if I stop, if I freeze, just let me know. So I will talk for about 40 minutes, and then we'll do some question and response. And I'm sharing my screen because I have a few slides that I want to share. I basically have focused in the area of civic tech innovation and design for maybe the last 7-8 years, although I think I was always working in that space, but from other sectors, whether nonprofit or private or academic. And specifically, I kind of help the federal government improve their products and services for the public. That could be citizens, immigrants, refugees. And currently, as Dr. V said, that means I'm at NASA as a service designer and a customer experience strategist. And I wanted to talk a little bit about something that I don't always get a chance to do. It kind of depends on the organization I'm with or what community that I'm a part of and the type of work we're doing. We call it participatory design. It has a lot of different names in actuality. I've heard some people call it collaborative design, co-design, co-participatory design, but usually all of these terms are referencing the same thing. Now, even though they're all referencing the same thing, what one person means by that might be different than what another person means. And sometimes people might say participatory design to mean a particular method, just like concept testing or a diary study might be a method. Sometimes they use it to say participatory design is a way of doing a method. So for instance, if we're doing a design studio where we're paper prototyping and getting ideas down on paper and then kind of dot voting and narrowing down to a specific idea, we could do that as designers, professional designers, or we could do that with the community on whose behalf we're designing or for whom we're designing, right? So it's a way of doing a method. Some people use it and they mean an actual methodology. And when I say methodology, I mean one of two things. One, a collection of methods, or two, guiding principles that help you choose a particular method in a particular context, right? And so a toolkit could be considered a methodology because it's a collection of methods that someone might use, and hopefully it involves guiding principles to help you to choose when to use it. When I use the term participatory design, I actually mean something different, something more radical, more fundamental, more far-reaching. I specifically mean that the community on whose behalf and for whom you are designing are full-fledged members of the design team, equal to the professional designers, and on that design team from the very beginning through the very end, throughout all phases of activity and work. There are no meetings apart from the community. There are no meetings with just professional designers and no community members. They are there from beginning to end. And that is something that is rare to find, I find, especially if you're working in a particular organization, because it means giving up control. So in order to explain this, I'm going to use a case study, but I want you to take particular attention, pay attention to this image that's on the screen, because not only are the community members part of the design team, but one of the special things that I love about this image is that I always try to make the number of community members equal to or greater than the number of the professional designers. So you see that in that image as well. So the case study I want to share with you today isn't perfect. There'll be issues, and hopefully you have questions about that, and I can be honest, and hopefully I'll bring up some of that. But this particular program called Web Academy, I was working for a multinational company, and this is the pet project of a VP of engineering, and he wanted this to be the next global certification that would rival like an Oracle certification. And it would have different tracks. There would be a basic track for digital literacy and a professional track that would help people who have businesses learn to use internet technologies to improve their businesses. And there would be kind of a software development track where we teach people how to develop apps, and whether web apps or mobile apps, and even like a system admin, or you could, these days we might call it a DevOps engineer type of track to help people kind of manage that whole thing. We had certifications where people could come online and take tests and then take that certification and show a potential employer that they have these skills and then use that. And we were a small team, as Google tends to be, team by team. But the impact or the effect or the influence is often larger because we work through lots of partnerships. And so this particular project was working with Telecenter Foundation, which is a network of telecenters around the world, right? And think of a telecenter as an internet cafe where you might be able to go in and use internet services. It could even be a place where particular government services will reach out to you because you live in an area where it's hard for the government to reach you. And so they have to either send extension agents or have these type of telecenters that you can travel to and then access certificates for your home, like a domicile certificate or car or things like that. And I thought a lot about this project over the years because as we were working on it, it had huge ambitions, right? We started on a January in a particular year, and the goal for the VP of engineering was that by September, we would have 150,000 certifications. When September came, we only had 1,500 registrations. So people didn't even go through it. All they did was register and it never happened. And not only were the students lacking an incentive to take it, let me say potential students, but the distributors, the facilitators, the entrepreneurs that were helping us and the telecenters around the world lacked the motivation to help deliver it. So I didn't know what was going on initially, but I had another parallel project. I was based in London at the time, and I was working in the part of the company that was called Emerging Markets. So we focused on, Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, West Asia, Southeast Asia, Russia, some Eastern Europe, South America, Central America, etc. And we had people on our team spread around all these regions, and we had a few people that were located in London and Zurich that had a particular functional expertise, while the people in the regions had regional expertise. And I was in London, and I was working on the side with a nonprofit called the Tinder Foundation. And the Tinder Foundation had a collaboration with the UK government. They had a goal that by 2020, 100% of UK adults aged 16 and up would become minimally digitally literate. And they had a website, and they had tutors that would work with people side by side to work towards this goal. And they had definitions of the spectrum of digital literacy. And it was a really beautiful vision and mission. And one of the things I thought about is how this program and the work for digital literacy in the UK differed from what we were doing globally around the world. I mean, we had this curriculum, right? And it was an application, there was education technology. And one of the components was about the Google search engine, and we had this module called How to Search, and there was a piece of it called Mixed Media, and you could see there search results and the knowledge panels and some more of it, and it was all Creative Commons, and it was great. But one of the things that I remember thinking was, in this UK program by the Tinder Foundation, called Learn My Way, which involved people working side by side with you as you built your digital literacy skills. In order to reach the goal, we had to measure our achievement towards the goal. And in order to measure our achievement towards the goal, we had to define what digital literacy meant. And I want to contrast the way we defined it in that program to what we were doing with Google around the world. Number one, right? Watch the process. Number one, we said, hey, in a country like the UK, a rich country, most of the people who are offline are the economically poor and the elderly, right? And so I think, for instance, in the US, we're similar. We're around like 80-20 right now. I think when we were doing this, it was more 75-25%. But today, I think it's 80% online, 20% offline. Most of the people who are offline are the elderly and the economically poor. Number two, most of the people who are poor would love to have more money in their pocket, would like a better job, would like more financial security. Number three, in a rich country like the UK, most of the jobs are online. Therefore, one of the criteria, right, one of the ways we assessed whether someone had a certain minimal level of digital literacy was the student or the person must be able to find jobs online. Now, if you compare that to the analogous unit or module in our curriculum, in the Google Basics Web Academy curriculum, the same module was called How to Search. Find jobs online, how to search. And I had an inkling that people were like, how to search? Search what? What's lost? What do I need to find? I had an inkling that maybe it wasn't relevant. And so what I wanted to do was to go on a kind of a mission, right? A research-based mission to figure out what were the complexities, the issues, the difficulties, the problems that people face in their daily life, as well as their aspirations, their hopes, their goals. And where could internet technologies play a role in helping them achieve those goals or resolving some of those issues that they were facing? Because that was where we had an opportunity to make it relevant. In other words, the barriers to going online are not just physical. It's not just infrastructural from a physical perspective. They can be a lack of relevance, right, or perceived relevance, a lack of time, linguistic barriers, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we were facing that in a lot of our work. So this project failed. It failed this Web Academy project failed 3 times. Did not reach the goal. Tried it again, didn't reach the goal. Tried it again, didn't reach the goal. Eventually, the VP of engineering left. The project lead left and switched off. And at this point, I was working and kind of running the project on my own. I had to decide, do I want to continue it, because it didn't have a lot of support, right? But I had a feeling that it wasn't the project itself. It was the way we were doing it. And there might be better ways to do this project. So when you think about participatory design, which we weren't doing, you might have the question, well, who's leading when you're doing participatory design? So I have this image here, right? And the design team is at the very top. Notice that, yeah, they're doing some research, some data collection, and so they're interacting with people, and people might, give comments and ideas, etc. But when they're doing the synthesis, you notice there are no people in that second column at the bottom. And then when they're building and prototyping again, they might interact with people and they might release it to people, etc. Even in this image, notice that there are two funnels. And when you see that funnel, they're not interacting with people. That's just the design team doing their synthesizing and funneling the information, right? So it creates this kind of jigsaw back and forth. I do something over here, I go to the people. I do something over here and I go to the people, which is very different than what I'm talking about, where the team is completely embedded. So you could think of it in terms of a spectrum, right? And this is an actual project I had where I was working with people in a particular region of the world. So imagine this woman here with the hijab, she's in a community, and these two designers with their laptops are trying to do some design, right? So on the right, you have user-centered design where the people with the laptops go to that person, they get some information, they go back and they do their thing. On the very left side, you have user-led design where the community people go to the designers, right? And that's where you say, oh, we're doing this community-led initiative, but we might need some architectural help. We might need some instructional designer help, but we're leading it. We're doing the research. We're making decisions, and we're pulling on their expertise. In the middle, I have user design, where it's not an integrated community. It's just the users doing, or the community members doing their own design without mixing with professional designers. And notice that I put participatory design between user-led design and user-centered design, even between user design and user-led design. I did that because you can do participatory design in a way that is not community initiated, right? Which is one of the critiques of the project case study I'm sharing with you. The community did not initiate and then come to us in my multinational corporation. We were initiating, but in as much as I could, I wanted to make it as participatory as possible. And so a lot of people talk about, you know, empathy this, empathy that, and I don't want to disparage empathy, but it's kind of nonsense. It's not that it's a bad, I mean, I understand the intention, but the thing is, how is it ever possible that I'm fully going to understand what someone else has gone through, right? A day in their life. I can understand intellectually, right? And I can give assent to particular intellectual assertions, but it's very difficult to feel the exact same thing, right? Even if we're both going through the same situation, right? We have a shared experience. My past, which in some sense is always present and which informs and influences the future, is different than your past. So I had a different parent. I may have had a different economic background, and that comes into play as I'm interpreting what's going on in this present situation. It's just a very, very difficult thing. So I always say the best way to gain empathy is not to try to gain empathy at all. Just have members of your design team who are members of the community. Then I don't have to worry about empathy. I don't have to worry about translation. I've worked, because I do work around the world, and I work with translators who are not trained in interviewing, and they'll filter the message as they translate. Well, no, my design team knows how to do interviewing, and I don't have to worry about that because they speak the language of the community. The embedded knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, the experiential knowledge is embedded on our design team. And they can, in a moment, speak up when we're starting to do something that's off. I've worked with many professional designers who are really good at their craft, who the further away they get from the research, the more their bias creeps in and they forget what things are. I've worked with designers where even design researchers were even not that far away from the research. We're just kind of going through and synthesizing the research, and they'll make an assertion and I say, well, where is that based in the data? And they'll say, oh, this one person said it. I was like, yeah, that's great. It's true. It's a data point. Qualitatively, it means something. And this is one person out of 1,000 people that we've interviewed, and it's the only person that said that. So from a quantitative perspective, in terms of how big is the group of people that this person represents, because that's important for us to understand as well. So I wanted to do this work, but I had a problem. I didn't have any resources. I finally was able to convince my organization and company to let me redesign this application and the curriculum and the entire educational service, but they gave me no resources. Luckily, at this time, there was a program called Google Reach, and Google Reach is a program that allows people to spend 3 to 4 weeks away from their job doing community projects on the ground, impacting lives all around the world. They do it every quarter, and they take usually, let's say, 20 or so people, and they break them down into teams of 3, and each of them in teams of 3 will work on a different project. This particular year, I don't know what happened. They didn't have enough projects from external groups, right? And the people that they might work with would be Kiva. That's an example of a project we've worked with before, the Grameen Bank. We've worked with them before. And they didn't have enough projects, or one of the external projects fell through. So they came to me because they knew that I did kind of super interesting, cool stuff in emerging markets. And I was like, yes, I'd love help. And so I gave them 7 or 8 projects. They ended up choosing the one that I'm sharing today. And so I immediately had 3 people to work on this from different places around the world, but they were still employed by Google. None of them were engineers. None of them were product managers. None of them were designers. These were people in marketing and sales whom this program often attracted because they wanted an experience that was a little bit different from the normal grind in marketing and sales. There's a word we have at Google called googly, which means a lot of different things, but fun, good-natured, good intentioned, caring. And we had this saying that the only part of Google that's not googly is the sales and marketing, because you have to be non-googly in order to make the money, right? So these people wanted a different experience. And so I had this team of 3. And what I did is I combined this team of 3 with 7 people from North and Central India. Why India? I chose India because I didn't choose India. That's where, for this particular quarter, that's where the Google Reach program was going. So it gave me a chance to redesign the program, the curriculum, the software for this North Central India community. And I chose some people from there. I had done work there, so I had networks, I had contacts, but I also had people on the ground on my team who were there who could help me find people that could possibly work on this program with us. In 2007, so this is I think you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people. So there's another person who's not in this image. So I think we had 11 people total that went through this process with us, different ages, different socioeconomic backgrounds, and we kind of all worked together to kind of do this work. In 2007, the Gates Foundation paid money to IDEO, which is considered the premier industrial design firm that kind of really heavily promoted that term design thinking. And they created a toolkit. And the purpose of the toolkit, this human-centered design toolkit, was to take the practices that we use in industrial design and software design and evangelize them, but really get them adopted in the international development community. I really love this toolkit so much. I still use it to this day when I'm working with communities, because it was for me at the time, and even still so today, it was the most robust yet simple to understand toolkit for people new to this type of practice, right? It had just enough rigor so that you could do good work, but had enough tips and examples and explanation that could help make it clear, at least with the facilitator. So that's what we use. And in 2013, they created a second version. You can find it online at designkit.org. It's different. It's not exactly the same. There are some things that are in one that are not in the other. So I actually still to this day will sometimes refer to the original one, because it does have some interesting methods that you don't find in this field guide. Plus, the design of the field guide, I think, doesn't work with a lot of communities that I work with. One of the ways that the original field guide, Human-Centered Design Toolkit, divided the phases of the work was into these 3 phases: hear, create, and design. And so this is what I would show them. And we showed them this kind of thing. And I would say things like, hey, when you go out into the field and you do research and observations and interviews and you have these stories. So if you look where the create is and you drop down, you see the word stories. The solutions that you create are different if you create the solutions right after you've pulled out these stories, compared to the solutions you create if you first take time to uncover patterns, discover themes, extract insights, find opportunities, and then create solutions. And so we were going on this journey with this group of people, which was hard because a lot of them had never been in a place where you didn't know what was going to happen. And they kept saying to me, what are we going to make? What are we going to make? What are we going to make? So we kicked off the work by defining literacy. I won't talk about it too much, but we can do it in the question and response. Define digital. And then we brought them together to create a definition of digital literacy, which you can find, and a few people have cited, not many, a few people have cited from the work that we wrote about this work, and so people have used that definition of digital literacy. And we started by phrasing the challenge. You could call this defining the problem, framing the challenge, a lot of different ways to say it. And we first started with what are the constraints and preferences. Constraints are characteristics of the solution, quote unquote solution, that must be true for this solution, this intervention to work at all. Preferences are characteristics of the solution that are nice to have. They're not required. It can still work without them, but it would be nice to have. And we created a kind of challenge statement. Notice in this challenge statement that you will see the words affordable, physically close, updatable, easily set up, time flexible, understandable, because I wanted the entire team, every time we saw the design challenge, we wanted to see and hear and feel the constraints embedded within them, right? Because there are ways to write challenges without constraints, and that's fine. But we wanted to be reminded of that because this was serious. This is people's lives and livelihoods. Normally, we might do a knowledge inventory where we figure out what we know and what we don't know, but we actually didn't do this step. We delayed it, which I only bring that up to say that the design process, or when you're doing systems work, it's a nonlinear process. It doesn't always work in the ways people teach it for various reasons. You start where you are, you try to answer the questions that you have, and anytime new questions come up, you try to answer that, which can take you in different directions. So we set about to do the research, and we first had to figure out who we needed to talk to, and we used the extremes and mainstream heuristic, where, for instance, any characteristic that would affect the thing we were designing. So for instance, people's willingness to accept technology. We needed to make sure we had a qualitatively representative sample. Do we have people on the right end who always adopt the newest technology the minute it arrives? Do we have people on the left side who are resistant and rarely adopt it, or the last people to come on board? Do we have people in the middle? And the idea is that if we make something that works for people in the middle, people on the left, people on the right, that hopefully it works for everyone along the curve. Right? This could be ages. If age affects how we design it, then we want to have that distribution along ages, et cetera. So our goal was to do that. And we had communities all over the place, from actual developers, right, to students, to business owners, to people on the streets, to drivers who were driving other people around, et cetera. We started picking research methods. We created a research plan. Notice this research plan actually shows that on day 2, we were divided into 3 groups. Group 1 is going to this particular community called Aware. Group 2 is going to a flower shop and talking with flower shop workers. Group 3 is myself. My name is Victor. I'm doing an actual homestay, contextual immersion, right? So you might call that participant observation. Like, they know that I'm observing them, but I'm staying at particular people's home with their parents and their kids. And we did all kinds of things. We did group interviews, we did one-on-one interviews, we did expert interviews, we did observations. So we did a lot of stuff. And the whole point of saying all this is, if people are new to the process, the participatory design approach transforms any design process, systems approach process into an educational one. So this is an example, for instance, of a slide that I used with them when we were training to learn about interview techniques, right? Draw it, 5 whys, show me, think out loud. These were things that they were learning to do and to practice. This was a picture when we were learning how to develop a beginner's mindset, asking questions that you already know the answers to. This is what we use to distinguish between observing versus interpreting. And when we were doing the initial research, the generative research, we wanted to observe and not interpret. Interpreting was for later. These are a few questions from one of the interview guides that they created. And then we set out, once we had the interview guides and we did our training, we were ready to go. We did mock interviews, mock observations, and we were ready to go. And we did, observations with people. We did contextual inquiry, like she's doing an interview in the space of this particular woman. We usually had one, we usually went in at least in teams of 2. So one person might be the lead interview, but the other person is the recorder if the interviewee allowed it. We had, photo recordings, video recordings, or audio recordings. This is a group interview in a particular community health center and educational center. This is prototyping, and that's just to remind you that prototyping is not just something you do. Actually, this is true for any method. You can give me any method you want, just name it, and I will show you how you can use it at any phase of any type of design process, right? Now, the reason why you might use method A in phase A versus phase B versus phase C would be different, but you can still use it. And so when we prototype in the research phase, what we're doing is We're not prototyping in order to build something, right? We're prototyping in order to learn. We're watching their reactions. We want to know why they think the thing they think and why they reacted in such a way. We don't care about the prototype. It's a throwaway prototype, which is an actual term. We're trying to learn from that. And so we did all that work, and here we were landing at, again, if you look for the C, the create, and go down, follow the white line, we're at the stories. So we came back from the field, and actually this is when we did the knowledge inventory, just to show you a little bit of what the team was doing. This is where we had to figure out, what do we know, what do we don't know? So, and what do we still have to find out? And we did this activity to figure out, and then we used the contradictions between what we put up on the wall to direct our work, right? One of the questions we asked, what do we know about what works? What are our early hypotheses about the solution? Some people were saying, well, it needs to be an online solution. Some were like, it needs to be an offline. Some said it needs to be self-guided. Some people say, no, how can you have self-guided for people who are learning to become digitally literate? And they need to be taught. So there were a lot of kind of contradictions, and we needed to explore those contradictions. This gave us a direction for further research, especially some of the secondary and desk research we needed to do. But it also showed our strengths, what we felt we understood. And the very fact that you can see there, like, we have a good understanding of the educational landscape in India was not because of me and the other 3 Google people. It was because we were doing participatory design. We had people who had gone through that educational system, and I think one of them might have been working in education. Okay, so we did a second. We went on, and this is now, what do we need to learn? Like, what do we know that we need to learn? And again, we're looking for the tensions and the contradictions, or where we have a preponderance of results. And one of the things that this informs is a recruiting strategy, right? We knew that we needed more info about what the government was doing around this space and how they were helping. We knew that we had weaknesses in the understanding of the culture of a particular group that was doing work in this area and how they did it. And so we needed to kind of go out and understand some of that. So that was continued research that was going on. When we come back from the field, another thing that we try to do is say, well, how do we rephrase the challenge? Because sometimes the problem statement that we have is wrong. It's not a problem. Sometimes it's right. It's a problem, but it's not the problem we should solve or we should try to address or redress, right? It's not fundamental. It's not dealing with the root cause. So there were a few different other things we were looking at that we could possibly look at that came up in our research. In the end, we felt that what we were looking at was a broad enough goal and also narrow enough for us to focus on and move forward with. So we actually didn't change our original challenge. And this was going to be, for us, a way to create something that would work specifically for North Central India, but then could be customized for other places around the world. But this was going to begin to create a standard model from which we could then customize for different needs around the world. So the team went at it. We use this process where there are different ways to do, as some of you know, because you do this work, analyze and synthesize the work. When you're working in communities where this is new, I find, especially for these communities, the best way to do it is a type of collaborative, real-time, physically on the wall type of process. So people would take turns telling stories from their visits, from their interviews, from their observations, the team that did it. And everyone else would just take notes. Every background piece of information, a quote, a fact, something observed. Each individual observation, fact, quote, background piece of information is on a different sticky note. And it's completely okay if people are duplicating what other people are writing down, because that's super helpful. Because if I take a sticky note and I move it because it has a connection to another sticky note on another part of the wall, there's still a duplicate that someone else can use to connect to something else. So it's completely fine. We don't worry about that. And, you know, again, we have to teach about every step of the way in a participatory design process. We have to teach about what are we about to do? Why are we doing it? How does it work? So we had to give instructions like, think like a reporter, who, what, when, where, why. Try to describe it in a factual way, not in a subjective way. Tell us exactly what happened, no more, no less. And so we did that. And as people spoke, we created sticky notes, and then we put them up for every interview, for every observation. And we began slowly to fill the wall, and then we had to move rooms because there wasn't enough wall space in one particular room. And that's what we were doing at the stories. And we're moving towards themes, right? The next little bullet point. We're looking for patterns, commonalities, and also insights. Insights is where we might combine a fact with a background piece of information, with a quote, to say something that the quote, the fact, and the background information don't say. We're looking for subtextual implications, right? below the text. It's not actually said, but these pieces of information come together to imply this. And so we had a few insights. I'm not putting any of the deeper ones. I'm just trying to give you an example of what people came up with. There was a lot even deeper ones than the ones you see here. But people realize there are a lot of cases where men won't allow women to work, or men might control access. So for instance, it's not on here, but men might control access, internet access for a lot of the women in the community, right? So you can see we're in a different room now. They're beginning to fill the walls. People are moving around. They're beginning to find things, find patterns. And at this point, we're trying to put them together in themes. Some people think, okay, I think there's an internet theme. Maybe there's a time theme, internet access theme. And eventually we had these themes. And the reason I mentioned about the men and women access is one of the things that came up is gender, which is really amazing because number one, with thematic type of work and synthesis, a lot of the themes are kind of pre-created by you because they're topics from your interview guide. So if I divide my interview guide into different topics, obviously I'm going to get a bunch of statements and quotes and facts and background information related to those topics because that's how I form my interview guide. We had no topic, no subtopic, no questions about gender specifically. So the fact that that came up was really good for us because we felt that maybe our research was finding things that we didn't actually pre-bake into it. So then we did some frameworks work, and a framework is just a visual representation of how things are connected. This is just one example of the frameworks that we created. I think we all knew this already, but people need energy access, right? And once they have consistent energy, right, and they're not suffering from continual or consistent brownouts or blackouts, depending on where in the world you are, they need internet access, right? And once you have that, you need device access. And once you have that, then you can get to digital literacy, what I call education there. Don't worry about the loyal users, that was just a Google thing, but you can get to digital literacy. Now, what we didn't know or didn't understand was that the word education there, which stands for digital literacy, was connected to literacy. Now, obviously, we knew that. I think if you look at the left arrow going from literacy up to education, we knew that when you become literate, like reading, writing literate, numeracy helps as well, like numerical literacy and visual literacy. But when you can read and write, it allows you to become digitally literate because the internet is dominated by text. There are text-to-voice applications, but they're not pervasive enough, and they're not used enough throughout the ecosystem around the world that you really did need to be able to read in order to use the information on the internet. But what we didn't know is that there's another arrow going from the word education, which stands for digital literacy, to literacy. That when people become digitally literate, there are programs and work that people with digital literacy go through to create programs and applications and technology for people to learn how to read and write. So we, at least where we were researching in North and Central India, it worked both ways. That as digital literacy increased, people were working on applications to help people increase in their reading and writing. And we created all kinds of frameworks on all kinds of things that we uncovered in our work. And this, when I say frameworks, this is where we're talking more about the systems approach and systems practice. And so those are some of them. And so we kept moving through this process. And at this point, we wanted to move towards what I call opportunities. Opportunities are avenues through which you brainstorm, right? We can brainstorm ideas or things that we might create to redress a situation or interventions we might create that are just broad. But we had opportunities to do some things. So could we brainstorm solutions? I shouldn't say solutions, but things that we can do, interventions that take advantage of an opportunity, right? So let me give you an example. We came up with a bunch of opportunities and we narrowed it down to these 5. Could we brainstorm solutions that empower women? Could we brainstorm solutions that improve health outcomes? And you see how it creates a really nice boundaries that allow you to focus on some of these opportunities that are really helpful for the people, and it gives you an opportunity really to make the whatever you create relevant, which is the whole purpose of what we were doing. How do we make the work that we're doing relevant? And so we began to brainstorm according to those opportunity areas. And when we did that, I felt that before we started prototyping things, we needed to practice prototyping. So that's what we did. We broke up into groups, and we chose 3 of the ideas, not because they're special, but just to practice prototyping. And we broke up into groups to begin to prototype. So this is an example of one group that was prototyping an after-school program housed in a school facility only for girls that use dance to improve digital literacy. And once we did that and people felt good and understood how prototyping, you didn't have to be wedded to the idea and you could throw it away, then we felt that we were ready to begin to actually do it. And so we did a voting and we began to vote on all the options. We came up with 3 top options, okay? And remember, throughout all of this, right, we're starting to get to the design phase, right? But I have this question that I always ask, like, when can research be done, right? We did research at the beginning, but we came back from the field and we still said, hey, we have more stuff to do, so we need to go out and still do some more research, some secondary research, and go back to talk to people, right? You can do research at any time. And so even at this point, we were still incorporating research. This is a nonlinearity. And we did this thing called analogous inspiration. That's where you say, hey, what are the activities and behaviors that people might use when they're trying to do this digital literacy thing? They might check in and register. They might learn new skills. They might ask questions, take notes. Where might you do those things? Oh, you check in at hotels, airports. You might search for information at a library, supermarket. Oh, okay, so these created places for the team to go and observe and see if they could take back anything that they learned from those situations and could they possibly apply to what we were doing. We also did something called positive deviance, where you look for places where people are in the same situation, right? So low digital literacy levels, and they're solving it through deviant methods, like methods that aberrate from the norm. So this is an example of hole in the wall. Many of you have heard that. You put a computer kind of in a wall, you let kids just explore and play with no instructions, no facilitation, no guidance. And then you compare the learning outcomes between those kids and kids who are learning the exact same things in a classroom with a teacher. And the research has shown that kids do just as well or better through this self-guided group play-based hole-in-the-wall type of intervention. So we had 3 groups. One created a bus. I can talk more about that, different stations in the bus. Another did type of a hole-in-the-wall station. They built a little prototype that had different places where people could come and do different things. With webcams and bioregistration. Another worked on a community services center with extension agents, and you had a card certificate that could help you identify as you were still building literacy and digital literacy. Then we went through the process. What you have on the wall, the reason it's really arranged very well is because these are all the things, all the insights, the themes, the patterns, the frameworks, the challenge itself, the constraints, the preferences. And this is always to remind everyone, remember, 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 because we need to carry that information into every stage. And so next to Louis, the person standing next to the wall, we had a really quick, like, bivariate heuristic of how do we evaluate these 3 different prototypes. So we looked at all the things that we wanted, constraints, but not just constraints, preferences. Does it have it? Does it not have it? And then you could just choose the best one. But we decided not to do that. We wanted to fuse the parts of all of them, the best parts, all of them, into one kind of prototype. This is a lean philosophy, by the way. You build as early as you can, which we did. You saw that, 3 prototypes, but you decide as late as possible. A lot of people will only build 1 prototype. We were doing multiple prototypes, breaking into teams and taking those far and testing those. And so it came together in this, which is this kind of bus / hole-in-the-wall community center that had a self-taught area and a taught area and had a telemedicine solution. Okay, I'm moving quickly because we're coming down to our final minute. They made physical prototypes, as you can see here, and it had different areas, including the area for the driver. They had prototypes of what it looked like for the software itself. Notice a different aesthetic. This was back in 2014, but still a different aesthetic than what you might use here in the US. And eventually, that was 3 weeks, a week of a research sprint, a synthesis sprint, and a prototype sprint, and it resulted in this, Google Bus Bangladesh, which over 12 months went to 35 locations in the country, visited a lot of campuses, actually, to work with college students that were still learning as well. I think over 500 campuses. But beyond that, it reached 100,000 people. This is another type of solution, intervention that came out. This is the Internet Sati program. Sati means helper, or partners, excuse me, in Hindi. And these women would go into villages all across India, rural India, taking devices and internet access and training up people in how to access information to improve their lives. I want to close lastly with explaining incentives. I didn't have the ability to pay people, but you have to think about incentives, because you're either asking people who have jobs to help you full-time or part-time, and that's time away from their families or their home life or their jobs, or you're taking people who don't have that, but they need ways to sustain themselves. So just quickly, the few things that I did. First off, everyone got free meals when they were working. I didn't give them dinner because we were working during the day, but they got breakfast and lunch every day. Second, some of them got publication. So we published twice, part 1 and part 2, and people got publications to add to their resume. I gave recommendations if anyone needed it. So this is a LinkedIn recommendation, but I actually had written recommendations, whether they were for jobs or for appointments. And ultimately, these people got used this experience to improve their lives. So one of them is now an instructional designer on the right in the green shirt. Some of the two of the women at the back are designers themselves. I think almost most of them became either designers or project managers of designers, or I think I have one of them, the person all the way at the back on the left, it became an engineer. But it all came out of this process. And all three of this is not everyone, I think at least one person, 2 people are missing from the picture, but all 3 of the Google sales marketing people quit their jobs after this experience and said it was the most transformational experience they'd had in their life up to this point. And then lastly, as I go back and forth to India, when I was doing that, I'm not doing that now, those are people that I would reach out to and say, hey, can you help us test this? We'll give you access to this. You can be some of the first students to try this out and see what it's like. So you can see Mr. Daman, who is the person in the bottom right picture in blue. He is also the same gentleman that is here on the left in the front. Okay, and I will stop there. Not too bad. It's 43 minutes, but we can take questions.
Victor, thank you so much. That was awesome. And definitely looking forward to the day when we can all get back out into the field. We've had some great questions coming in on the Q&A, so I'll just go through in the order that they arrived. Mehasuri asks or says, they appreciate the discussion of empathy. I've always wondered why we need to care or have empathy for a community in order to treat them like full people. I'm curious how to find community needs if the designer is not part of that community. So I think they're picking up on your thread of, yeah, don't just have empathy, get people engaged directly so that you're not making a bunch of assumptions.
Yeah, and yeah, so I don't even need to say more about that. I think that's the best way. I think you're always at a disadvantage if you're trying to find the needs of people. Of course, that's what we do as researchers. We try to uncover that. But we also need to understand that as researchers, we affect the interaction is both ways. So when I come into a space, I'm affecting and changing people just as they're affecting and changing me. So one of the things that I try to do is understand that if I map a system, for instance, so I showed you some frameworks, but if I do a systems map, when I create an intervention, or a group of us create an intervention, whether we're a community or a multinational corporation, we then change that system. So we have to map and monitor and remap, because that interaction is going both ways. It doesn't stay static. So the best way really of uncovering communities is to use the community. And so there are methods to do that. And I'll talk later if this comes up. Positive deviance is a really beautiful, it's not just a method, it's a methodology where you say, hey, I'm not designing anything. I'm just gonna go in and see where are people that have solved this problem already. Thank you, Bill. Solve this problem already. And can we just amplify that knowledge across the community?
Awesome. I'm going to move to our next from Matthew Alexander, who asks, for throwaway prototypes, how does the observation process differ from traditional prototyping and testing? It seems like it can be difficult to ignore evaluating the prototype and only evaluating your understanding of how people do things.
Yeah. So, but that's exactly what you do, Matthew. You are not evaluating the prototype. If you're evaluating the prototype and you're trying to do research, something is wrong. The purpose of research is to learn, right? So the process differs in that everything I'm doing is to learn about their needs and what they like and what works for them and what doesn't work for them. It's not about the prototype itself. So if you are spending too long building a prototype for research, something's wrong because you're not going to use it. You're just trying to learn. In fact, some people might even prototype. One of the ways I've seen people do this is just take an existing product or service that already exists, and I'm not even building anything, and I just want to get people's reaction to it so that when we create something, we're creating something that is dealing with the problems that are inherent in the quote unquote solutions that already exist and moving a step beyond that.
From an anonymous attendee, how did you or your team learn how to teach participatory design? And how did you measure whether the community folks you were working with were learning?
Oh, that's a great question, anonymous. So I didn't do a formal, I am a learning designer, but I didn't do a formal type of learning assessment and measuring and assessing the skills. So a lot of it was more what I would call not competency-based learning, but outcomes-based approach, right? They learned by doing. They would create the interview guides and we would edit the interview guides together. We would practice mock interviews and we would take turns providing feedback. So you would interview, anonymous would interview me, and then a third person would watch, take notes, and give feedback to the interviewer, and we would rotate. So we did things like that, always providing and giving feedback. No one ever went out alone to do any of the things, so they were always in a community. So if I'm interviewing someone and I make a mistake or I forget something, another teammate, we always practice doing this. Hey, at this time, I just want to ask my teammates, is there any questions any of you have? Anything I forgot or anything you want to bring up? And that just gives an opportunity to make it, collaborative, which it is in real life. You don't have to have all the answers. So that's how we did it. The question about how to know how to do it is a good one, because I get really, I don't know about you all, but confused because I got to have my ethical design toolkit, my universal design toolkit, my liberatory design toolkit, my equity design toolkit, and everybody has a toolkit. And I prefer to think of the work as take whatever toolkit you have to do whatever your process you're doing and just be ethical about it, be inclusive about it, think about equity. Now, it's not easy for everyone to do it, and so they need a toolkit, but it's impossible to have 10, 7, 8 different toolkits for all these different things that are separate processes. You want to think of it as overlaying an equity lens or overlaying a participatory lens over an existing process. So for us, we didn't have a participatory toolkit. We just used a normal human-centered design toolkit, but we did it together in community.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that is probably really helpful for everybody on the call. If you're a student, that you're going to learn things on your journey, and then keep learning, keep finding new strands or new threads and other toolkits or processes that you might pull out and apply, a bit organically, or you may shift over time. So having that flexibility is really valuable. I'm going to skip down just to a question from Susan Winter, who's our Dean of Research. How do you address community needs that are truly incompatible? For example, men want to control women's access to the internet, and women want to have control over their own access to the internet.
So there are multiple ways to answer that question, Dean Winter. One way to answer that is that it's probably impossible to create an intervention or a service that works for everyone. So in the bus example, think of the internet sati example. That was for women alone, and that was by women, for women, to women. So we were creating solutions that were for particular groups because it wasn't possible to create a service that worked for everyone because of some of these intransigent, or seemingly intransigent dynamics. The second way to answer the question is that your question really brings up the issue of systems, right? Systems of injustice, a patriarchal system, patriarchal, capitalist, sexist, whatever you want to put in there, because they're all class, sex, race, caste even, they're linked. So what I find is that when people want to work, they want to do design justice or equity design. They sometimes forget that when you use a systems approach, if you use a systems approach, you can't do it in the same way you might do human-centered design, where you're like, okay, we're going to go through this process and we're going to produce something in a month or 3 months. When you do equity design and you're working against systems of oppression or systems of inequity, that is multi-year, I would even say multi-decade work. And so the time horizon at which you have to work has to be different. But a lot of times our funding mechanisms, our support mechanisms don't work on those time horizons. So we have to work to bring that all into place. So it is possible that in certain futures, one service could work for a lot of those people. But in the meantime, if I'm creating something for now, I've got to create different services. At the same time, I have to use a systems approach to begin to change those structures so that we can come together and do that as one.
Thank you. That was a great answer. We've got a question from Amy Hung. How do you find user design research to differ in a virtual environment? We're in a different world, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I do a lot of video research. A lot of it depends on the level of device access, internet access, digital literacy of the people that we're doing research with, right? So one of the things I do, I don't require them to use the platform that I have. I conform to their platform. So I've done work where I have to switch to Facebook because someone can do Facebook video on their phone, or to Skype, or whatever it is they're using, or maybe it's over the phone and we're not even doing visual. I try to do visual because it helps. If they can see me, I can use my face and my body language to kind of reduce anxiety in the opening parts of an interview. So that they're more likely, hopefully, to open up. But sometimes we do audio as well. Sometimes what we'll do is unmoderated interviews or research, where you're not there, but you have a software system that helps moderate and tells them tasks to do, and it records that stuff for information. They may not have access to that, so it might be something where I'm using people who are on the ground over there to do that. But again, that has to be things that can be done at a distance. So they also themselves might be doing it remotely. But I can go into further details with some of that.
Thank you. We have quite a few more great questions.
Oh, let me answer one more. We have all kinds of tools to when you get the information. So we're working remotely, but we have tools like Mural, if you've ever used that, or Miro, where we're doing a lot of the analysis and synthesis in Google Docs or Office 365, et cetera. So we have tools to do a lot of those communication, WhatsApp groups, Slack, Teams, et cetera. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that chimes with a lot of what we're doing this semester. And I think even before pandemic times, before I was at UMD myself, I think there was a lot of use of Miro and Figma for teamwork, prototyping, brainstorming, and things like that. So we have a few more questions, but we're also at the end of our hour. So I think unless Dr. V wants to stay on longer with us, we should give him a virtual clap wherever you are.
Well, I can.
And say thank you.
I allotted 30 more minutes, so it's up to you.
Okay. So yeah, and we've got the webinar space, so I will pose those extra questions, but if anybody needs to dash, of course, totally understood. So Wayne Letters, a colleague of mine who has taught and helped design the user-centered design course, says, let me scroll up. A really wonderful overview. Can you speak to the future role of designers? We're inherently intermediaries. A great dentist works her way out of a job by improving the knowledge and practice of her clients. Similar for UX professionals and librarians, question mark. If not, what is our role in a fully tech and design literate user future? So a lot of questions in there, but.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. It's a great question because there's been this, what some people call the democratization of design. Now design is everywhere. Everyone's a designer. Everyone always was a designer. It just wasn't acknowledged. Whenever you were making choices that affect how a program works or how a service works, how software works, whether you're a director or you hold the money, you are making design decisions and choices. The thing that has caused confusion though is when you say everyone's a designer, then it's like, oh, we don't necessarily need designers. But look at an analogy like cooking. Everyone eats, not everyone cooks, but a lot of us will cook sometimes at least, or a few times. Some of us never cook. But you cook at home and ask yourself, is there still need for chefs, right? And you say, well, yeah, number one, chefs might work in restaurants that you might go to when you need a night away from cooking, right? But two, chefs make cookbooks. And three, chefs have what I would call a craft. And this is where it gets into the difference. I think what you see here and what some of these people did through the case study that I shared was they worked on the part that was, most of their work was on the part that was generalizable to all kinds of design, which is the framing, the research, the analysis, the synthesis. The prototyping starts to get a little bit more specific into what are you prototyping, right? So I can do research if I'm doing human-centered design, let's say, for a building, but when it gets time to build the building, I need people who know how to build with materials, whether it's polyurethane-filled steel beams or whatever you're working with. So there's still, for me, there's still a need for people with a particular expertise in different crafts, like interaction design, or a craft like content strategy, et cetera, right? But everyone needs to have what we call design literacy. Not everyone will be designers. Same thing with computer science. Not everyone needs to be a computer science, but we need computational thinking literacy, right? So there is a difference between the crafts. And what the craft does, right, is when someone says, gosh, this isn't working, the craft allows you, when someone takes your design and says this isn't working, can you change some things or make it a little better? It feels dark. You can quickly then go back and say, oh yeah, I know how to do that because I've had years of making mistakes like that or having feedback like that, and then going back and reworking it to fit a different kind of mood or to make it differently. I think anyone can do it, but if you don't have that craft experience, it takes a little bit longer to kind of go back and rework that. So the craft, I think, still has a place in the world at the same time that everyone is building design literacy skills. I don't even know if that's a good answer, but I can talk more about that.
I think that's great. It actually dovetails with a nice question from another anonymous attendee. They write, how can designers convince leaders / decision makers to utilize this type of design process? I think they're asking specifically about participatory design, but we might open out a bit more, even though it might require more resources, time, or effort.
So that's the role of advocacy. And it's one of the things I find most design programs don't teach, right? They teach you about whatever it is that you need to learn the skills, but not the advocacy skills. Because a lot of, especially in my area of user experience design or software design, a lot of organizations will start out as engineering organizations, software development organizations. And then later on, they're like, oh gosh, we need to think about user needs, and because we're just kind of making stuff. And so they'll hire one person. And so part of what we have to do is not just do our job, but also advocate for our job to build the team, right? One of the ways you do that, including advocating for participatory design, is through what we call design maturity models. I'm not going to go deeply into them. Maturity models in design are about 20 years old. The main point of them is just to say this, it's not to say, hey, look at you, you're at level 1, you're not a good organization, or we're not a good organization. The point of it is to say, if my organization is at level 1, we've hired one designer. What are the things that I need to do? What are the tactics, the initiatives that I need to do? What's the coalition building I need to do? What educational work do I need to do in order to raise us up to the next level, level 2? Where I might hire another one, or to the next level where I might embed designers in all the different product and service teams, or the next level where I begin to go beyond user experience to customer experience, or et cetera, et cetera. There are many different levels. So I use those types of maturity models, or different ones that they kind of inform my work in terms of the advocacy type of work that I need to do. But the main thing to remember is it can't just be me alone. I need to build a coalition so that it's coming from different people. And ultimately, what will convince people, in my opinion, is when you get a chance to do it, you have to show results, and you have to do them in business language. Market researchers are really great at this. Designers and design researchers are not so great. You have to be able to speak to how does this affect bottom line organizational goals, like high level impact. What does doing participatory design do for that? Depending on the topic, or it doesn't have to be a for-profit organization, it could be a nonprofit, it could be an academic. We have to think in terms of that and show a return on investment. So ROI is one of the hotter topics in design now, like the ROI of design, and you have to show the ROI of participatory design.
Is it fair to say, for folks who might be thinking about the job market soon, that if they're doing a bit of background research on an organization that they want to apply to, they might go and look at current staff and see maybe the number of designers and the teams that they sit in, if that is visible to them as they're searching, might be a good proxy for that design maturity that you were talking about?
Yeah, and I would even ask, while you're interviewing with them, talking with them, ask them if you can have, you know, a little bit of informational interview with someone that wasn't going to be part of your interview process. Like, can I talk with some of the designers and try to understand their perspective and see what they like and what they don't like, where it's been and the trajectory and where it's going.
That's great. Thank you. I think we are getting to the end of the questions, but I think there's maybe one more, a couple more. One from Catherine Raymond, who asks or says, amazing presentation and experience. When choosing participants to be on your team, do you go out of your way to choose people you know very little, or do you seek out people who seek you out? Are you trying to convert people along the way, or getting people who are already interested and kind of get what you're doing?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for the question, Catherine. It kind of highlights the power imbalance, right? And this is why I said that there were still flaws in this work, right? It wasn't community initiated. It was initiated by me. Now, what I was doing was I was trying to act as a change agent. I don't know if I was successful or not, against some of the wishes within my company, right? There were people in my company who said, people that I reported to who said, oh, it doesn't matter. Let's just do what we do for the highest end phone, right? Because basically this work that we were talking about meant that we were having to do stuff for people with tier 2 phones, like a phone with limited internet capability, as well as SMS based type of things for people with basic phones, tier 3, some people call them. And there are people in my company that say, you know, it doesn't matter, just let's design stuff for smartphones, and then whenever people get there, whenever they finally come into their first smartphone, then they can access what we've created. I was like, no. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, if you're trying to do something to help the next billion come online, but the only people you're focusing on are people who have the only people you're focusing on are people who are already literate, then you have problems. So we had part of our work, I didn't show this, but it's like we had to do stuff we had to either create something that helps people become literate and then digitally literate. We had to partner with people who were doing literacy work so that as they became literate, they came and then accessed our services and programs. Or we had to say, forget it, we don't care about them. And there were a lot of people, majority of the people where I worked were of the third opinion. And I said, no, we should do the first or the second. So in answer to your question, for us to do the type of work we're doing, I hate to say, it sounds bad to say, but there can be bias in a participatory design within the community itself. Right? So yes, I'm biased. I'm a professional designer, yeah, yada, yada. I don't know the community, and I just have this particular idea of what's right and what's wrong, or what's good, what's bad. But I can also pick people from the community that are a biased sample of the community. So what I'm thinking of when I am working to get people on the team is a qualitatively representative sample, or as qualitatively representative as I can get. I want people of different age groups, different literacy abilities, different economic status, etc. Because then I'm going to have more of the different disparate lived experiences housed within the team.
Great.
So we had, Catherine, we even had in that project, we had dynamics on the team that I had to work against, because in India, I think more so than in the US, people have a great respect for the elders. So much so that you don't really speak if they're speaking, or you don't question what they're question. But I needed to work against that because I wanted so desperately to have everyone's opinion at the table. I wanted to hear from everyone because this didn't work if everyone didn't give their thoughts and contribute. And so it was hard. It took a while, but we finally got there through the process, and in a way that was respectful of the culture as well. So yeah, I try to seek out people that help create a representative sample, because you can have bias within the community that's on the design team.
I'm going to ask you one final question. This is coming from one of my students. So I asked them to do a bit of preparation for today and then come up with a question for you based on their reading. Somebody has asked, how are you influenced by your past experiences at 18F and Google when you decided to pivot your career to NASA? So I guess asking about your own trajectory.
Yeah, wow, it's getting deep. So when I left college, when I graduated, or in my senior year, a lot of what I was thinking in my mind, or even in grad school, was, do I want to work in the private sector, or do I want to work in the nonprofit sector? No one ever told me, hey, there are other sectors, there are other ways to do quote unquote good work, right? And we know sometimes design for social impact or design for good is not the best framework, which is why a lot of people say design justice and research justice, and we can talk about that as well. No one ever said, hey, the government is huge. The government makes decisions about literally all aspects of our lives. And if the government can begin to transform in positive ways, it can have really, really huge impacts on people, both in our country and wherever we have influence around the world. And I wish someone had said that. So it took me a while to get to the public side, but part of what I was trying to figure out when I went to Google was, is this where I want to be? And I was very wary of it. It was the first time I had ever worked for a for-profit company. I had never worked for one before, and I wasn't sure I wanted to go there because I wasn't sure I could do what I wanted to do. And so what my friend who was trying to bring me over, we were in college together, she told me that she thinks it could be a really cool opportunity for me. And so we decided, and I decided to treat it as an experiment. Go in, and if it works and you're able to do what you want to do, then great. And if not, then you can leave and treat it as a learning experience and use that as you move on. So I think the difficulty for me was that when you had to decide between what was best for the community and what was best for the company financially, the decision, in my experience, always went towards the company. And so that was a struggle. And so I was looking, when I left Google, for a place where I didn't have to worry about money. But I didn't want to go back, and I had worked for nonprofits before. I didn't want to go to where you're always fundraising, because I felt burnout through that process. So I was specifically looking for a social enterprise, a place that had social aims like a nonprofit, but revenue generating business models like a for-profit. And I found it in 18F, funny enough, because 18F, strangely, is a company. It's a public company. It's owned by the government, but it takes no money from the federal budget. All of its money for its the salaries it pays, the utilities, the lights, all that comes from the money other government agencies pay them to pay 18F to help those agencies solve problems. So it has to be cost recoverable. It's mandated by Congress. And that was amazing, so that we were paid for the good work we were doing, and we didn't have to have the way we make money and the way we do good to be two separate things and contradictory things. So I love that. The fundamental issue I had when I was at 18F, which led to me going to NASA, was that fundamentally in the government, you just have less power actually fundamentally as a consultant, you have less power. We had more power than government contractors because we were inside the government. So people trusted us more. Oh, you're feds, you're not out to get us, great. But we were still outside the agencies that were hiring us. And so I had to do a lot of influencing, advocating, cajoling, recommending. And they could say, no, thank you for the recommendations. Or, yeah, I like them, but we'll take care of it from here. Or, I like them, and now we'll hire a contractor to do it. And so I knew that ultimately one of the things that I wanted to do was to be part of the decision-making structure, be on the inside, be embedded in the organization. And I said, you know what? I'd love to be hired directly by an agency and be part of that. Because without it, what I was doing was a lot of what I would call strategic design, where I was trying to design the organization. In other words, how do I use this project that this agency is hiring us to do to affect things we're not hired to do, other projects. How do I use this project to affect the organizational structure of the org? How do I use this project to help the organization make decisions that affects the legal apparatus, the policy apparatus? And why? Because that means after I leave, this is a 2-month project. If I can do that, those changes, those things will continue to affect future services and future products. But if all I did was just work on a product, then that means 6 months from now, when they need a new product or a new service, they have to call someone and get help again, and nothing's changed. And now being embedded, I can help do some of that. It's a stronger position to do some of that transformational work.
Thank you, Victor, so much. This has been an awesome talk. I learned a lot. I can tell from our Q&A that's been busy. People have learned a lot and are taking a lot away. So again, a virtual round of applause. Thank you. And the lecture has been recorded and we're going to be sharing it out soon. Thanks very much, everybody.